Morning all, Col here. Another day, another Sunday, another session on box making. So, last week, what we did last week is we built this beaut little tray. Now, we didn't get all of it done, but we did get the whole tray pretty much built. All the components are there. We put the box together, but we didn't get time to do all the other little bits and pieces that I do around trays. So what I'm going to do today is I'm going to start by doing all the little bits. Now the first thing we're going to do is we're going to put finger stalls in the top of the box, the top of the handle, so that you can grab a hold of it. Now often I've been asked when somebody picks up one of my trays, I've got finger stalls on the inside of the box, and they go, "Oh, how did you do that?" Basically, you do it before you finish it, before you put the box together. So what we'll do today is we'll put all the bits and pieces together, hopefully at the end. This is the box. Now, what I wanted to also do with the box is have a little play with the hinge stalls if we get time. If we don't get time, well, they can always wait till next week. So our tasks today is put the finger stalls in the front and the back of the box, of the handle, and then in here we have, you can see that, we have this dovetail trench cut in there. We did that last week. So what I want to do today is also cut the sliding dovetail that goes into the top of there from another piece of material, and I'll show you how I dress that up before we get it all together. So there are our two tasks today. So let's go on with our first one. I'll just shift all this stuff out of the way. Now normally when I cut my finger stalls I'll use a box core bit, but I've decided to change today, and I'm going to use this. Now it's a spiral bit with a dome top. You can see it's got a dome top. It's actually a lot, the diameter of this is a little bit bigger than the box core bit that I normally use and the one that we have in our kit. I haven't been able to get any lately, so I'm using one of these. Now the technique is exactly the same, whether you're using a box core bit or you're using this spiral with a dome top. So let's get that sorted. The first thing I like to do is set the height. Now I'm going to bring this right down close because it's a little bit of a fiddle to get this sorted. I need my spanner. Now, depth, what's the depth? People keep asking me, how do you work out the depth? The depth doesn't really matter, as long as you've got something there that you can grab a hold of, something that you can put your fingers in and your fingers sit into and pull it out. How long is it? There's something that you want to have a fiddle with yourself and sort of come up with a plan where you might want one that goes all the way along, you might only just want a little hole there. Okay, so something small. It's up to you. Work on your design profiles and have a little play with that sort of thing. So when I do mine, I have a 2 ruler height adjuster. So all I do is I just get 2 rulers, 2 steel rulers. Okay, so sometimes they're a millimetre thick, sometimes they're a little bit more. Really doesn't matter. So I've got 2 of those sitting one on top of the other. This is very scientific, mind you. Sit my other ruler on there and just drop it down till it stops. And there's my height adjusted. It's as simple as that. And all I did was make that up. That gives me a trench in here that is adequate for lifting the tray out when you lift it out of the box. So that scientific measurement over and done with, the next one is to work out how long I want my trench. So we have to set up a fence. So I have my fence here. Now, you must make sure that you work on the diameter of your router bit. Okay. Now that's a fairly wide diameter there. It's a little over 1/2 inch, and so I need to make sure that where I put this, I've got enough room at the top, like so, so that you don't chip away this when you pick the box up. So the centre of that will be about there somewhere. And again, this is just a guess. Educated guess, mind you, but a guess. So all I'm going to do is set that line, and I'm not quite sure if you can see that. I'll put it over this side. You can see I've lined the centre of the router bit up with my centre mark here. Okay, so that's all I've done. So pull the fence so that you've got that there. The outside edge of the cut will be there, and the inside will be down here somewhere. Lock that in place. And so I've set that up. Okay, trying to get that even closer so that you can see what's going on. So bear with me for a sec. ET's not playing the game today. So now you can start to see what's actually going to happen. So that's going to sit on there. Okay, now we're going to feed that across the router bit in that direction. All right, so what we need to do now is to work out the distance from here to here that we want to go. If you just want to put a dot in there, we've got to put a stop here and a stop there. Okay, so if you just do, and then you just imagine dropping it on top like that. But I'm going to do a little bit different. So I'm measuring from the start of my curve. I've got 54 millimeters. So 27 was the centre. So there's my centre. And I'm going to have a 30 millimetre trench. So if I just mark my 30 there and my 30 there, okay, that'll give me a 30 millimetre trench. If you want, you can square across there. I don't find a need for it, but if you wish to do that, that's good. The next thing we need to do is we need to put stopping and starting points. The stopping and starting points, what I have here is just 2 bits of off-cut thin material. I'm going to put those like so. Now, at all times while you're doing this, you've got to remember you're working very closely with a spinning router bit, and you need to take particular care with safety issues. Keep your fingers away from the router bits is the first one. Now, the technique that I use to make my stops, to set my stops, is I drop my left-hand mark onto the centre of the router bit, spin the piece of timber in, bring up my stop, unlock it in, and I do the same on the other side. So I move it across, shift that into there, put that on there, and then just lock that in as well. Okay, so all I need to do now is go up to my stop, move along to the stop on the other end, flip my piece of timber over, start there and move back. Once you've cut your first cut this way, you can always drag it back a little bit, but it's not a good idea to start that way. Always start push to the right. Sorry, push right to left. Boy, got to have that one right. Always push right to left, otherwise the material gets kicked away from your fence and then you'll end up with a little gouge. Now, when we start, we drop straight down on top, we push along, and then I'll go back a couple of times, and then I'll lift off, all right? Don't go back and forth like this and then drag it off, because that will only cut through the edge of your timber. So, I need a pair of earmuffs. I have a pair here somewhere. So, ears on everybody. I'm just going to get this started, and I'll show you how it works. Here we go. And that's my little finger store. Okay, you can see the centre of the router bit has come to my mark on both sides. Of course, you're going to get a bit of overlap because of the depth you're cutting, but the centre of the router bit comes to both sides. So all I do now is flip it over. If you find, here's an error that occasionally occurs. If you measure from the centre, I've got 17 millimetres there, and on this side here I've got 16 millimetres. If you need to adjust something, it's just a matter of moving your fence away a little bit. Okay, I'm not going to adjust over a millimetre. So let's do it again. And so there we have the finger store on both sides of the piece. Okay, so next task, now that I have all of these done, next task is to cut the dovetails for the dovetail trench. So I'll put those aside. Now what I want to do, let's get rid of all this stuff first. Didn't take long to do that little bit. And you can use a box core bit. You can use anything that's got a round top on it, really, for that. And you can make them as wide as you like. Box core bits actually come in about 6 different sizes. So you can get a very small one, or you can get quite a large one. Okay, I'll need this here. So take this out. So you can adjust your box core bit according to the size finger stores you have. So if you have someone with very dainty little fingers, not like my big plates of meat, but someone with very dainty fingers might not need such a big groove or trench. Now, if you remember rightly, when we cut the trench for the dovetail, for the petition that goes, when we cut this trench, we used the H10 dovetail bit. So when we cut the dovetails for the piece that goes in there, we have to reuse the H10 dovetail bit. Normally I would do the whole lot in one go, but we just didn't get the opportunity on last week. So this week I have to show you how to reset. So all I do there is when I cut the trench, I went straight across the dovetail bit. I had the fence up here, if you remember that. So what I'm going to do here is adjust the height of the router bit. So all I need to do is make sure that can't quite see what I'm doing, but what I'm doing is I'm just making sure that the router bit is high enough that it scrapes on the bottom edge of that trench. Too low. Still too low. Okay, this is going to be a bit of a fiddle. Got to make sure there it is. There's my height. Okay, now the other thing that you'll notice here is in my fence, that's the same fence that I just used, you'll see that I've got that cutout. That cutout's the same shape as my router bit. So put my fence in. Now, when you set this up, all we need, and I'll have to draw this for you. No, I won't draw it because it's just a bit too difficult to do that. What we'll do is we're going to stand our piece of timber up like that and just run along there. Now, the thickness of this piece of timber is the same thickness as the top of the router bit, 6 millimeters. Okay, so that will fit into there. And what we need to do is, this is just a test piece by the way, is just cut a little trench on a little dovetail on the end. Okay, so we just cut across the dovetail here and then test it. Okay, now this is my tester. The piece that I'm going to use is that piece there. Okay, so what I've done is I've used a large piece of timber, a wide piece of timber, and then I'm going to cut my dovetails on both ends of it, and then I'm going to cut the height. By having a wide piece of material, that will give me a fairly safe hold down when I cut on the saw. So the idea is to do my test first. So I've got to set this up. So and what I'm doing is I'm just trying to get only just enough material protruding, or only just the edge of the router bit protruding, so I don't cut too much into it. Try that. Now remember, this is a test piece, so always good idea to use your tester. Let's go back to this camera. So what I'm going to do there is I'm going to just cut through like so. Shift that out of the way. So if I hold that on there and then slide the whole thing through, it should be able to get it nice. Like so. Ears on. Okay, so just sand the little furry bits off, and you can see I now have a dovetail. just time to fit. Okay, so I've taken too much off. You can see there's a huge gap in there. Right, I don't want that. So what I have to do is now, remember it's a test bit, readjust my fence so I'm taking less off. Now, it's not a lot.
I think the technical term is a 15th.
You're not allowed to use that term, are you, Pam? Yeah, a tiny bit.
Everybody knows what I mean.
Okay, ears on.
Oh, beautiful.
Okay, so now we have a perfect fit. Just remember this is a tester. So what I have to do, I'm actually a little bit too shallow, so I need to bring the route a bit up a tiny bit, which is becoming a little bit of a drama. Actually, I'll leave it like it is, and it should come in quite nicely. Okay. So, our proper bit, ears on. Sand off the furry bits. Like so. Same on the other end. Okay, so now we have our dovetails on both ends. Now it's just a matter of, we'll put the box together and then we'll just see if things fit. So, my crosses.
So, are you on the top camera? Because we can't see very much happening there and the fence is in the way.
Okay, so just putting the box together like I normally would, like so. Okay, so there's my tray. Now, see if we get a fit. Look at that. That's going to slide down in there nicely. Now, I'm not going to force it in, but you can see that it's started to slide in there. I'm not going to push it all the way down, and we've got a really nice fit on both ends. You can see the dovetails are actually working really nicely on both ends there. So I'm not going to do that. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to cut a piece. Get it out. I can measure down to the bottom of the tray, and I've got 34 millimeters. Yep. 34 millimeters. So off the end of here, I'm going to dock 34 millimeters. Get my pencil. I have to be reasonably accurate with this. 34 millimeters. And then over to the table saw. Now I'm going to bring this over to the table saw because I'm going to do something else. As well. Okay. So, see that? Ears on, everybody. Now, so that piece is going to fit into there. I'm not going to put it in until such time as I'm ready to glue, but when you turn the box over, you'll have the dovetails cut out of there. So why don't we cut a little piece that goes out of, comes out of there, it goes in there as well, off the same piece. Okay, so that's 3 millimeters. So if I cut a 3 millimeter piece off the edge of that, and remember we've got plenty of it, a better measure I suppose, might be a good idea. And it doesn't matter if it's a little bit proud when you put it in there. Okay, I can bring your teeter back now. So now I have the box and I can just pop that piece in there as well, like so. So that will get pushed into there once I glue it together. And this piece will get pushed down into the trench there. That will get pushed down when I glue it together, and that will give me 2 compartments. Okay, so just a cute little idea. That's just an idea of how things might work. Okay, so let's get that done. We'll glue that together. So there's my 2 bits. Get rid of all of this stuff that we don't need. And we'll glue things together.
It's going to be a pretty little tray when it's finished.
Yes. Just takes a little bit of mucking around getting all the gear together. Whatnot. Put this out of the way. Put that on there, and I always clamp my thing just in case things slip. Support your tray when you pull it apart. Glue. A bit of this. What was Roman asking me?
What if he wants to know if you create the base in two pieces and make the centre full height with a trench in it, or is the timber too thin to have trenches both sides?
It's too thin, yes.
Yeah. There is always a reason why you do things the way you do them, isn't there?
Yep. Where are we up to? Gluing. Need a piece of scrap. You can always, if you're watching and you find that there's some of the stuff that you see could be done another way, by all means experiment. This is the way I do things. I find that over the years that I've been doing this, I've sort of worked out a little technique to cater for all the bits and pieces that I do around boxes, and they work, and so I just keep doing them. So if there's something that that you see that you can redevelop some way, by all means experiment. Now remember when we glued this together last time, I spoke about gluing. A couple of people commented that they thought this is a really good idea. When you glue the dovetails, what we don't want is we don't want squeeze out on the inside of the box. So the idea is to hold the internal part of the box in your hand so that it's in the palm of your hand and work from the outside, and only 3/4 of the way through the dovetail. You've seen during this process how tight and how snug those joints are. You don't need stacks of glue to hold the thing together. If your joints are loose, then by all means put as much glue as you need in it, but just make sure that you don't over glue. But if your joints are really loose, then what you need to do is check your jig and just make sure it's adjusted correctly, because the joints shouldn't be really loose. You don't need lots and lots of glue to hold these joints together. A little bit on the inside here. Remember, I only put the glue on the end grain. So, wipe off the excess. Always a good idea to the damp bit of your cloth. Wipe that off. Drop your base in. Glue on both ends. Isn't this great, watching somebody glue things together? Mind you, it's only a small thing. Wipe off your excess. And just squeeze that together. Remember that as soon as you get your joint wet, it's going to expand the joint and it's going to make it difficult to put together. So that's where a good Bessie clamp comes in handy. And there we have the box. Just check for square. So all I'm doing there is just checking to see that I've got it perfectly square, which it is. You can see it's just absolutely spot on. Now to add in our extra bits. So that's going to go into there. So all we need to do is push that down there. So a little bit of glue in here, don't need a lot. Just wipe off the excess. Remember, there's no pressure on this thing, it just pops in and it stays in there. One side's a little tight. It's not going to go in. This one's a little bit tight, so that one's okay. Okay, now I haven't taken it all the way down. There we go.
Beautiful. You see, you don't need a rubber mallet, you just need the palm of your hand.
Yep. So that's got that in nicely. Just a little bit tight there. There must have been a bit of something in the joint. Okay, so now we have that. Now all I want to do is the little bit on the back. So this one here, the beauty about doing it this way is that the base is not jammed up that tight that it can't move. Okay, I'm just going to give that a bit of a squeeze this way. Just make sure it's all in tight. Okay, and there I have my box with the petition in it. Okay, so that's what it looks like front and back. And when people turn it over, your base is all one piece so that it can expand and contract without having to be adjusted. This is sitting up a tiny little bit, but that's okay. I'm going to plane that off. This one's sticking out a little bit, so I'm just going to plane that off. But what I need to do is sit and wait for that to dry. Okay, so that will be set aside to dry. So that's the tray made. That will go into here. Okay, so that will fit in there like that. Doesn't fit just yet, but it will go in the top of the box, like so. Now, before we go much further, I was going to start on the lid. But what I might do before that is I might cut the trenches for the hinges. Now these hinges, these are Brusso hinges. There isn't a stop hinge like this manufactured in Australia, and there aren't too many places where you can get them from. So they're open to 91 degrees, as you can see. They're very, very good quality. These are the hinges I'm going to put into this box. Now, just shift this out of the way.
So how long are they, Col?
These ones are 1 1/4 inch. Now, the hinges I use in my trinket box. The hinges I use in my trinket box are 1 inch, and so therefore I use a 1 inch router bit to route the trench for these. These are 1 1/4. It so happens it's the same length as the diameter of our tenon cutter. That's 1 1/4 from tip to tip, and so we can use this cutter to actually cut the trenches. So that's a very good way of doing things, by having router bits that actually suit the hinges. So I'll just get rid of all this stuff off here. As you can see, we tend to build up a fair few bits and pieces in the process of doing the stuff. Thank you, Penny. There's my bench. Okay. For those of you who are hanging out for a Triton router, I've heard on the grapevine, actually from the new suppliers, that mid-May is when we will more than likely see them again.
No promises.
So no promises, but that's just what I've heard. So if you're hanging out for a Triton router,
mid-year.
hopefully. Okay, just going to pull this apart, get rid of all the bits and pieces. You can see how easy this is to pull apart now, and everything fits perfectly snug. The problem I had before was on the day we fitted them, it was very, very wet. So there I have my box. Now, what I've marked on here, the back, there it is. So that goes like that. Okay, and I put a couple of light marks on there just to mark the back. I've also written on the top here, top, because when you get these nice and smooth, you just got to make sure you've got it the right way up. Otherwise you end up with the top down, and that puts your joints out of whack. So what I want to do now is cut the trenches for the hinges. The hinges will fit from the front right through to the back. Okay, so they should protrude out the back a little bit, probably to the centre of the pivot, which means that 12mm material is quite good to use for this size box and this size hinge. So just use that, and we'll cut all the way through. So measurements, where are we going to put the hinges? Now here's another experimenting bit that you might want to play with. Where you have them is dependent on what you think's right. Okay, you want them right out on the edge like that, that's fine. If you want them in the middle a little bit, that's fine too. Okay. I have a rule of thumb, 40mm from the end, from the edge. So that gives me a measurement to there. Okay.
Do you do that in the trinket box also, Col, or do you modify that?
No, I do that in the trinket box as well. So I have 40mm to the outside edge, and it's based around what looks good when you've got it together. So depends on what sort of box you got. If you've got a tiny little box, 40mm might be too much. Okay, so just lessen it off a little bit and take it back. So 40mm on here looks quite good because we've got quite a large hinge, and the spacing in the middle looks quite nice. So just play it by ear. So when I set the height of the router bed, I use my hinge, set the height, there's my height. Okay, so it's just flush with the top of the, just check it, make sure it's right on the other side, and there we have that. The next thing is to get my fence. Oh, drop the screws, Penny. I'll have to get them out.
Oh dear.
All right. Just be careful you don't lose the screws.
It's like you losing a grub screw.
Oh no, 2 screws to hold the hinges in. Hinge screws. What do I do with that other hinge? There it is. I'll put those together. Okay, so I've set 40 millimeters. I need the mark on the outside. E2 round where you can see what's going on. To my fence, lock my fence in place. And now it's just a matter of over the top, right? Now, there's a likelihood of tear out. So I go really, really slowly. I have in the past added other bits of material on so that I don't get too much tear out. But I find that that's more of a hindrance than anything. So I'm going to push through there. I'm going to lift that over the top and push through again. And then I'm going to do exactly the same with the lid. So ears on, everybody. I just need to curve this. Cedar is extremely furry, so all I'm doing there is just taking out the little furry edge that's created, and I've got a perfect hinge, and then my hinge fits absolutely spot on, perfect. So it fits in there beautifully. All right. Next one, sit it over the top. There we go again. Now when you have a look at that, you can see there's a little bit of a tear out there. Go and fix that later. Don't pull it back towards yourself. If you pull it back towards yourself, you're going to pull out a bit too much material. So push it forward and sand it. Fold it around the inside, like so. And beautiful back. Same on the inside. Push it forward into the trench. So now these are going to need a little bit of tidy up, not much, just like so.
It's actually a really simple process, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. It is. If you're struggling with hinging, one of the things about hinging is it's extremely difficult task to get it right. Now, if you're using a chisel and a hammer, you'll find that it'll take you a lot of time. It's not a simple, easy process. But what all I've done is suited my material around the hinge rather than try and sort of suit the hinge to the task. And then we need to do the same on the other one. Pretty easy, and then when you put your pieces together, the hinge holes line up. See that? Perfect line up. And then if I just put the hinges in, now I'm not going to screw them down because there's a little bit more work to do and we're running out of time very fast. So that's going to go there. So there we have it. And my hinges are done. Okay, so let's go back here. You can see that's where the hinges are going to fit, and it fits quite nice. Now the problem with these hinges, if you look at the hinge, it's not rounded on the back. If it was rounded on the back and you open the hinge out like so, all you would see would be a dome, right? But that's not actually happening. What's happening here is you've got the edge of the square bit, which is the stop inside, actually protruding through past the base of the hinge. So what's has to happen is we need to create a little bit of relief on the back edge of the hinge hole, so the back edge of the hinge hole, so that that will happen, right? So that you can get it to open and close. I could bring it out all the way so that it, but you've got a fair bit of hinge hanging out the back there, and I don't want that to happen. I want it to sit in a little bit, so I've got to create that that mark. So when I put these in, this is how I do it. So I'll fit that. I've just got a piece of scrap. It's only a small piece. It's really thick. Put that in there. Let's get this out of the way. Clamp that down. So now it's got something to sit against, and I'm flush with the front edge. Another little tool. I have to find that those screws, Penny. I dropped on the floor. There it is. It's all right. Okay. So let's get to where you can see what's going on. So that's going to fit onto there. Drill my hole. Screwdriver. Slowly running out of time here, folks, so all I can do is to get that in for you, and then I'll fit those, and there we have one hinge fitted. Okay, I'm not going to try and close it over because, as I said before, the bit that's protruding out the back, these little edges here, they're going to cause you a bit of grief and I'll tear out a bit of the material. So I have to create some relief there, and I'll do that at a later date. So here we go, same again. And once I have this in, folks, that's where we'll stop for today. And next week I will have the hinges in already, and the other screw that I dropped. Like this. The beauty of having a clean floor. If you drop the screws, they're only tiny screws, as you can see. You can find them. I have lots of people who ring me and say I've lost a grub screw out of my router bit. I can't find it amongst the sawdust. And I'm thinking maybe you should sweep the floor. Okay. So how's that? That's how quick it is to get those hinges fitted. You can see they look really nicely now. They've got a nice even spacing. It's uniform, and all I need to do now is the same with the lid. So the lid's going to get the same treatment. It will fit on like so. Like that. But first of all, we're going to build the lid, all right, before we actually fit anything. So at least that work's done. Now I can get on with the rest of it. Okay, so we'll start that next week. So we'll stop there, and we'll continue with our lid next week. The lid, there's going to be quite a bit of work done to the lid, so that's going to take a couple of weeks. We're going to start building the lid with a few little features in it that I don't normally show, but they'll happen there. So if you're going to flick over to Dave, I think he's continuing with his lechem bench, so have a look at that, see how he goes, and I'll see you all next week. So stay healthy, everybody. Have a good